First, let's start with this case. I went to my brother's house yesterday to visit his 3 kids and pregnant wife. He was not home. The children are hellions, but I try to treat them as nice as I can, which is hard. They don't get out much, only to go to school, so I told them to pick something to make, and we will go to the store and get the ingredients. They chose candied grapes. Every time I take them to the store, I have to preface our visit with rules as to what not to do in the store. No running, no asking for anything that's not on the list, no playing, no wandering off. As soon as we get in the store, I put the youngest 4 in the cart, and the oldest 12 promised that she could push the cart with no issues, so I let her. The middle child, 11, immediately began asking for stuff and tried wandering off. The oldest kept crashing into stuff and knocking things over, and the youngest was screaming at the top of his lungs. We checked out, and the cashier gave the youngest a coloring sheet and some crayons. We walked to the car, and I watched all of them get in the car. When we got back to the house, I helped the youngest out of the car and realized that either him or the middle child had colored all over my car seats. I asked the youngest if he did it, and he said no, and I told him I think he did, and he kicked me. I took them inside and told my sister-in-law, who is sitting in the garage smoking a Black and Mild, what happened. She did nothing. The next day, I was going to the car wash and discovered crayon marks all over the rear passenger side door that the kids were using to get in and out the day before. Yellow and blue crayon marks all over the door. The crayon marks had been pressed in so hard on the door that there were scratches underneath, and I couldn't get the crayon or scratches off. I took pics and sent them to my brother and his wife, telling them that they need to pay for this and that his kids have no home training. I told him they don't watch them and just sit in the garage smoking and drinking all day while the kids run wild. I told them how I'm always trying to do something nice for the children, and they don't respect me or my stuff ever. My brother told me it was probably an accident and was very defensive. I took my car to get repaired, which was $300, and told him to pay it. He said kids are kids and said that if it bothers me so much, I don't need to do anything for them. I told him he needs to take accountability, and he said just don't do anything for them. Once he sent the money, I hung up on him. I wish I could show you all the outside of the door. Am I in the wrong for being upset with him and his wife for being bad parents and telling him his kids have no home training? Edit. When we all got out of the car at the house, the only crayon marking I saw was on the seats, which I knew I could get out myself, so I wasn't bothered too much. I don't know when any of the kids could have drawn on the outside of the door as I was watching them whenever they were outside the car. I think the middle child snuck out and did it after I told him I wouldn't buy him any more candy for the grapes. Let's start judging. You are. You're not in the wrong for expecting your brother to pay. And your assessment of these children is accurate. They are far too old to be acting like that, including the preschooler. That said, you are choosing to take these children out into the world when you know they are half feral. If this incident hasn't ended your relationship with your brother, be sure to only spend time with them in their own home. And if the situation in the home is too hard to be around, just stop it entirely. Everyone sucks. You didn't handle the children well, although admittedly they seem to never have been taught basic manners by their parents. Your main mistake was in having rules without consequences. You told them how you wanted them to behave in the store. The first time the middle one asked for stuff, or the oldest ran the cart into something, you should have said, "Back to the car now. If you can't behave, there will be no candied grapes," and gotten them out of the store, into the car, and dumped with their parents however big a tantrum they threw. Then if you ever decide to take them out again, they might listen to your rules. If they don't, back home they go. If you're not experienced with children, you might not realize that crayons can be a problem. But on the other hand, these are very undisciplined children, so you might have suspected that they might damage things with them and confiscated the crayons until you got to their house. I'm not saying you're the for being angry with your brother or his wife or even the children. Your brother and his wife seem to be raising a pack of hooligans. But your brother did suggest punishment, that you not take the children out again and paid for the damage they did. I think maybe you need a bit more experience in setting and enforcing the rules for their behavior when they're with you. You're not in the wrong. Had a similar issue with my friend's kid that spitefully poured hot pink nail polish over literally everything in our spare room. As someone that really dislikes confrontation and demanding money from a struggling single mother, I haven't asked for payment, but nor have I gotten a quote for removing it from the carpet. Likely replacement LBH. That'll be a few hundred when I need to. If it were my family member's child, I would tell them to pay me back $20 WK or something if they can't pay outright. But they better damn well pay. Next up, we had a terrible snowstorm hit here last month. I had heard from some of the other family members that my mother-in-law was staying in a car with my brother-in-law, her son. On Christmas Day, we told them to meet us at a nice restaurant for Christmas dinner. What I saw was pitiful. They were both skin and bones. I told them they could hook a big heater up to their car and stay in our driveway until the storm passed. It has well passed, and they are still here, and we're cooking every meal for them, which has put us in a financial strain. My brother-in-law has been on drugs for a while and can't hold down a job because of it. Since my mother-in-law has stayed with him, she is also doing heavier drugs, and her mental health is declining. She lost her husband 2 years ago, and since then is losing her mind. She will talk about people stealing her name on Facebook and framing her to drag her to hell. She's always saying stuff like this. My brother-in-law leaves a mess in the driveway. The neighbors have mentioned it to me. He also revs up his car, and the neighbors have complained. My mother-in-law is waiting on a big check, and has been for a year, but I fear that has already been spent on drugs. Everyone in the family has asked her to stay inside in a room, and she wants to live out in the car with her youngest son and the poor dog he keeps in there. The dog has pooped in the car. My husband feels like they are his responsibility since his dad passed away. I told him he needed to give them tough love. I told him to give them money for a hotel for a week, since he finally found a job at a restaurant, and that they couldn't come back. My husband says I don't have a big heart like him, because I've never been homeless, and he has. I feel like we need to push them out so that forces them to get their life together. I'm torn because my mother-in-law needs to be in a mental hospital, but she would never forgive us if we went that route. Am I in the wrong for kicking them out of here? Side note, we've tried letting the brother-in-law stay in the guest room in here, and he steals stuff and leaves the house a mess. Let's start judging. You are almost certainly in violation of a city code that prohibits people living the way your mother-in-law and brother-in-law are living, which means that you are subject to being fined, perhaps daily, for allowing it. Call your city or county government and ask. There may be a code enforcement officer that will come and tell them to move for you, or just show your husband the code and ask if wants to pay a fine to let them live in your driveway. Either way, get them out before something bad happens. You're not in the wrong. You're not in the wrong. It has to be against city code to let people live in a car on your property. It is also unsanitary. It sounds like your mother-in-law has had a break with reality. Look into what it would take to put her on government assistance and then to have her committed. Unfortunately, if you keep going as you are, she and your brother-in-law will pull you both down with them. Give your husband a chance to do the right thing for you too. If he won't, it's time to make arrangements to live elsewhere. If he can't consider what's best for you and respects your wishes, there is little left to hold on to. Mental hospitals don't work like most people think. Your mother-in-law is not a danger to herself or others. She's not suicidal or homicidal, so she is most likely not a candidate for inpatient hospitalization. Also, the majority of inpatient hospitals are for crisis intervention. They are short-term, usually 1 to 3 weeks, and are intended to stabilize the patient. Just for your information. But if you do think she is a danger to herself, you can call 911 to get her assessed. Next up, so I work 2 jobs and it blows, because I make more than enough to be comfortable at my first job. I had to get a second job when my wife's family basically lost their home, and I had to give in and let them move in. I wouldn't have minded if they would have settled for the guest house, But no, they said it made them feel unwanted. So she asked my wife if we would help her with groceries, and my wife, not wanting to say no, said we would. I was furious because I had told her I had quite a bit to pay this month, on top of the food for Easter that I had to foot on top of all the stuff for the kids. It was insane, so I said no, and pretty much left it at that. She then tells me her mom is in the car ready to go, so I might as well get right with it. At this point, because I rather avoid the fight that would come, and honestly I felt guilt. I have the means, so why shouldn't I help? So I said, what about $150 for the week? And if she needed more help, we would revisit after I pay the bills I needed to pay. I thought she would be upset, but she said okay. They get home, and I found out my phone went off notifying me a withdrawal was made a short time before they got home. It was for over $300, and I'm like, what the hell? Her mom said I had said it was okay when it was not true. I blow up because I couldn't spare that money. She has condition that needs very intensive physical therapy twice a week for 6 months, and I'm paying out of pocket for. Every cent I make is budgeted to the last penny. She needs this therapy because in 6 months, if she doesn't respond to it, then it's surgery as a last resort. I'm trying so hard to save every extra dollar I can, so if that is the road we have to go down, then I want to be able to take off for a few weeks to at least be there for her. This was a setback I couldn't afford, and I was livid she would betray us like that. Whenever she needs something, I have given it, no matter how much I knew it would hurt me. I had enough and called the cops when they asked if I wanted to press charges. I did, and now my wife is beyond livid that I would do this to her family. She thinks I could have simply spoken to her about it and asked her to pay it back. Now I feel a little guilty. But am I really the idiot for going straight to pressing charges without talking to my wife? I feel she would have talked me out of it. Am I in the wrong? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. You have a wife problem, a big one. You should tell your wife you're quitting your second job and that she can take a second one, or first one, if she wants to pay for her fam. I'm all for helping family, but you know this is going to get worse, and you're asked to make all the efforts alone. Talk to your wife and put your foot down, or at least find a middle ground if that's what you prefer. You're not in the wrong. Never let your in-laws live with you for an undetermined amount of time. Set a date by which they need to have their nonsense together and be out. You've been more than generous with them, which has only led to them taking more and more. If you give a mouse a cookie and all that, your wife is also enabling this nonsense. Sounds like she's the one that should be working 2 jobs, while your in-laws provide free childcare in return for your generosity. Quit your second job. Tell your wife she can take a second job, if she has a first job at all, to take care of her leeching family. Trust me, when she herself has to do that, this will soon be over. And if not, she can go live with them. You're not in the wrong. Next up, I am the one in my family that hosts get-togethers, holidays, graduation parties, showers, etc. I am an event planner and own a small event hall, so it just makes sense, plus I genuinely enjoy it. My side of the family is huge, lots of siblings and kids. I have always offered up my event hall and planning for their use, even though it comes at a cost for my business. My niece, now 25 F, we can call her Mary, has taken me up on that 3 times in the past, for her post-elopement party and 2 baby showers. For each of those, she gave me no directions, just said, do whatever you want. So I did, trying to keep her in mind. At her first baby shower, she turned up 30 minutes late in raggedy sweats, stayed long enough to eat and gather up the presents, then left. No thank yous offered. My brother and Sael, her parents, made excuses, saying the pregnancy was very rough. So we made allowances for that. At her post-elopement dinner, she again showed up late, stayed on her phone the whole time, ate and left. Again, no thank yous. When my mother commented on that, my brother said she was going through some newlywed stress as an excuse. Her second baby shower started the same way. When she asked me to gather up all the presents so she could leave, I suggested she stay and open them so everyone could enjoy seeing what was given. She scoffed and said, I don't want to stay at these little parties any longer than I have to. So I gathered up the presents and decided not to offer my little parties to her in the future. Fast forward to her sister's wedding shower. We have a delightful time, even though Mary has done the usual eat then leave without offering to help or just be there for her sister. My brother and I are loading up the presents when he mentions that Mary is expecting again and when can I host the shower. I told him I wouldn't be offering this time around and why. He was taken aback and said that he was surprised I was letting that comment get under my skin, but whatever. My choice. The next day, I get an irate call from Mary. I remind her that she said she didn't care for my parties, so why does she want it anyway? It turns out she got rid of all her baby supplies and needed a shower to get the presents. I told her to post her registry online, and I'm sure people would help her out. She got angry and hung up. Then my brother calls. He says I'm being childish. I told him that if he wants the shower, he can pay for it, and gave him the standard quote for that event cost. He just sputtered and said they'd have someone else host. The family is divided on this one. I still feel like I'm not being unreasonable. Am I in the wrong? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. She shows zero appreciation for people, you, going to the trouble to arrange events, and basically uses you to gather people to give her stuff, with no effort or financial responsibility on her part. Basically, she expects everything to be given to her, and her spoiled majesty is aghast you won't keep up her status quo. Your brother, and others, are just enabling her. No one seems to register that it costs you time and money for someone who doesn't appreciate it in the least. You're not in the wrong. And who has a baby shower for every kid? She's 25. It's not like this was a 10 years down the line surprise. Why isn't keeping her baby stuff instead of using you to crowdsource for gifts? She and her parents are so entitled. I'm sure others in your extended family have noticed she can't even pretend to be thankful before collecting in her gifts, stuffing her face and leaving each time. You're not in the wrong. Your niece is using you to get free gifts. She shows no appreciation whatsoever to the effort you have put into any of these events that you have planned for her, not to mention the time and money that you have put into them. The fact that her father expects you to provide a free venue for the latest child is just ridiculous. Back in my day, and boy am I showing my age here, we passed around the big-ticket items once we were done with them until the next little one came along, with the exception of the crib mattress for safety reasons. I had purchased a small, portable bassinet that I'm pretty sure went through at least 10 kids by the time we finally retired it. Friends, relatives, in-laws, and finally niece's kids. Babies outgrew the clothes before they could be worn out. And when a new little one came along, we gifted the essentials: diapers, wipes, new onesies, if the knees' toes had been worn through from crawling. Your niece is being a complete mooch, in addition to being entitled and rude.